Tennessee's most improved unit from 2022 to 2023 will be Caleb.
It's going to be weird because we covered them yesterday, and they're not going to look most improved because who they're running behind won't be as improved. But I'm going to say running backs. I think running backs will be their most improved unit.
Okay. I am going to say linebacker. And here's why. Because heading into the season last year, didn't we believe that Jeremy Banks would be an impactful player, would be one of those guys that would change the course of a season, which he did in a bad way? Didn't we think he was on the verge of being one of the standout defensive players in the SEC, at least, perhaps the nation? Well, here's what happened. Take away the Columbia collapse, of which he was a big part of that. He was not incredibly impactful throughout the season. As a matter of fact, he was Tennessee's second best linebacker to Aaron Beasley, who returns. Jeremy Banks, almost by subtraction, you get addition. So he's gone. And now I think that Tennessee will be better at the linebacker position, which nowadays pretty much consists of two people since everybody runs nickel all of the time. But the Vols were 12th best in the SEC in pass coverage last season, 11th best in the conference in overall defense. That's not good. And I know that the secondary has to be discussed when you talk about pass coverage, but Caleb brought up the point early last year, and he hit the nail on the head. The coverage in the second level was not good from Tennessee's linebackers. So I credit Aaron Beasley with quietly having a very good year. And while everybody was talking about Jeremy Banks in the preseason around South Carolina, his entire season, I think, was an incredible disappointment.
Yeah, it was. It absolutely was. He wasn't and I missed the boat on that last year. I lashed out at all SEC voters for naming Jeremy Banks third team. I thought he should have been first team. And
I said Tennessee needed 11 of him on defense. That's how.
Wow. So we were both in this realm, and he was a complete letdown, a complete disappointment. Did not improve his game in coverage. I can't believe he was on the all combine team. I'm sorry, I'm not touching him if I'm an NFL scout.
Nope, me neither.
And so, yeah, I think that I get what you're saying with linebackers because Keenan Peely then comes in. I don't know if Keenan Peely is as athletic as Jeremy Banks, but he's got better intangibles than Jeremy Banks. So I guess you're basing this off of the younger freshman linebackers like the Elijah Herrings and Caleb Perry's, one of them stepping up, and then Aaron Beasley improving dramatically.
I'm basing it off two things. The two linebackers that'll play the most, I believe, in Peely and Beasley. I believe Peely will be the tackle-to-tackle guy in the middle, and that will allow Beasley, who made some plays behind the line of scrimmage last year. It may surprise you to know that, but I think that Beasley will be freed up a little bit with Peely handling the tackle spot. I don't know that Peely, watching some tape of him, is going to be a sideline-to-sideline guy like Banks was supposed to be and really was. But Peely was BYU's second leading tackler last year. He had 62 stops. He's not a behind the line of scrimmage guy. So I want to see if that happens in Tim Banks' off defense because they ask people to do that. But if he's able to do some of that, great. If not, allow Beasley to do it. He had 76 tackles, led the Vols in tackles for a loss with 13. I think that he's a very underrated player, not only at Tennessee, but in the entire conference. Now, so I'm gambling on those two guys. And then I'm also gambling the fact that Banks' subtraction by addition will make the linebacker core better. And then if you want to throw in a third, you mentioned some of those names. They do need somebody else to step up, a young guy, a freshman, because they lose Jawan Mitchell and they lose Salam Page a third. But those guys are just kind of guys, really. No offense.
Yeah, Mitchell was a bit of a disappointment. He was a 4-star transfer from Texas. He was going to offset some of those losses. In his defense, he suffered a season-ending injury in 2021. Came back in 2022, was struggling. But if you remember, Mitchell had a strong finish to the season.
He did.
I will say this. Him transferring was a shock to people like me because I thought there was going to be an open door for him to see a lot more reps this year. maybe that leads to something. Maybe he knows something we don't. Maybe some of those younger linebackers have really taken that next level. That's always possible.
Could be that somebody stepped up. The thing about Jeremy Banks that I think was so frustrating from Tennessee standpoint is that he was so athletic. How do you not have him on the field? So even if a young guy's pushing him, are you going to take his snaps away? And then you have to think to yourself, how is he going to react if you do? I know coaches say they're not going to worry about that. They're going to play who needs to play. But I'm just going to tell you from knowing coaches, there are a lot of times where a decision to play one dude over another is 50-50, Caleb, or even 60-40. So if you think this guy's going to be a distraction in the locker room and you're 50-50 over whether or not he's a best fit against team X that you're going to play on Saturday, you might play Banks just to take the safe route.
Yeah, I could see that. Sometimes you take the risk, sometimes you do the safe route. I agree. It's tough to figure out how to balance that. I go back. I'm trying to think of a time where, when you cover, was there a time where you felt Fulmer made a decision because it was 50-50 and he wanted to make sure he kept the player happy because he didn't want to lose them or him to be a distraction?
If you combine distraction with talent, if you want to do the distraction / talent, James Banks.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's the ultimate player. That's one of the most gifted athletes that I've covered. But during practice, I can recall him drawing the coach's eye and they said, run. And he didn't. He just stood on the sidelines. He didn't run like he was supposed to. He was as emblematic as any player that Tennessee has had during that era of if you can play, you can do what you want to off the field.
Yeah, no
James
rules.
Banks was that dude. And maybe Jeremy Banks, no relation, was as well.
Yeah, except Heupel took a stance against Jeremy Banks. Knowing what it might cost Tennessee, he did it anyway.
He did in Columbia, yeah, he did. But
yeah.
Maybe he should have taken a step a little bit earlier. Because you got Jeremy Banks, who was a big Jeremy Pruitt guy, and they were still talking, and he didn't like the change. Some more things that I've been told since all that went down. Go ahead and hit that like button, Mr. Jones. Thank you for pointing that out. Like button and share. We greatly appreciate that. And a little bit of defensive back talk. Let's go off script for a second because we have questions about that. Cornerback for today's tough question, brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, was the question by John. Said, how can you get worse? So cornerback, yes, they have got to get better there. But defensive backs as a whole, you and I both like Trayvon Flowers a lot and thought he was overlooked. Are they better? We're going to have a complete breakdown next week of the secondary, but are they better there this year by default?
I am warning John Hill for saying that. Yes, it can get worse. I mean, it absolutely can. And I think you're going to see that this year without Trayvon Flowers. Because I like Jalen McCullough as a physical safety. I think he's a good playmaker. He knows where to kind of be on the field to make certain plays. I don't think he's as capable of covering for deficiencies at cornerback as Trayvon Flowers was. And so
that's my issue too, Caleb. I think we're saying the same thing. I don't know that they have the dudes.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they have the players. I mean, Warren Burrell is healthy again. Gabe Giuliani transfers. Maybe that helps a little bit, but like that, I feel like those improvements are there. I don't think Gabe Giuliani is a number one cornerback. I don't think you think so either. I think maybe he could be a number. There's no cornerback on Tennessee that can guard a number one receiver. They haven't had it since Alontae Taylor left, and they're not going to have it this year.
John, I want to give you great news here, buddy, but Hendon Hooker got coached up, okay? And there are a lot of players, and I think player development under Josh Heupel is vastly, vastly overlooked. I think he's incredible at that. So maybe they do it in the secondary, but I athletically don't look at guys that have great hips, that have great natural ability. Maybe Slaughter. I don't know if you mentioned him just now. as I was addressing the message board. Maybe.
But they use Slaughter a little more at nickel because they need help there. I mean, because you and I both don't believe in Tamarian McDonald that much at nickel.
No, that's fair. Well, sorry to rain on your parade on St. Patrick's Day, guys. I really am, but
here, okay, I'll say this.
We're honest at least.
This will be the key, and we'll find this out in the spring, by the way. I'm not saying it will get worse. I'm saying it can. The key will be, does any of the new safeties coming in, does one of them prove they can step up and do what Flowers did? None of them have a lot of high star ratings, but part of playing safety is just understanding where to be on the field. And, so maybe someone emerges at that other safety spot opposite McCullough. If that happens, we're having a different conversation. But they need to be somebody who has genius football IQ that can pick up a defensive playbook in a month. Because
Mr. Jones brought up a great point. New dudes, Ricky Gibson, Jordan Matthews. So we're saying they don't have the dudes now. In particular, of those two, I like Matthews, watching his tape. So I could see him having an impact. And let's give you a little bit of optimism if I can. I've often said that other than running back, the easiest position to come in and contribute immediately is corner. You either have that natural ability or you don't. And you can tell a guy, you can make his responsibilities limited at corner. Safety, it's not that easy, but at corner, you can do that. So perhaps it's Matthews or Gibson. In particular, I like Matthews. That is a real possibility, Caleb.
Yeah, that's a possibility. You're right. That could work. So corner's easier than receiver?
I think so. I think you can get me personally. I think you can step in and be a lockdown corner, whereas if you run the wrong route as a receiver, that can lead to a turnover. I mean, me personally, if I were to list the easiest ones and the ones I would be most apt as a coach to put in, it's running back, obviously, run to the green, handle some pass pro, and then next it would be corner. But you could argue the other side and say receivers.
I think you're right. I didn't think about the route running because corner, either way, you're just reacting to the route running, so you're not. So that makes sense. And honestly, Alontae Taylor and Bryce Thompson both started at corner for Tennessee as true freshmen, and were always reliable. So, yeah, that's a good point.
Travis says convert some of these wideouts to safeties. Maybe Jesus is terrible. Travis, it ain't that bad. Matthews or Gibson are going to show up. They will get better. So vastly improved, I don't know, but they'll get better in the secondary just by experience, right?
Well, I think the cornerbacks will get better. I don't know if the unit as a whole is going to be better because I think Trey Flowers is going to be so missed. And you can't replace Trey Flowers and what he did. Again, this is a John Hefney situation. Like we've talked about, Rashad Baker.
It's just a great comparison. You brought that up last year. It's a great comparison.
Yeah. Those three safeties. I remember Rashad Baker in 2003 really sacrificed some of his draft stock because he was covering for some deficiencies.
Rashad Baker sacrificed a lot. 2 days before he was moved to defensive back, Philip Fulmer said he was the most fluid wide receiver that he had ever seen in his career.
Wow.
So 2 days later, he was moved to defensive back, and Baker's got to be like, what the H?
Well, they had to move him, though, because I remember that 2000 secondary couldn't buy an interception. And they desperately, like Willie Miles was the best player in the secondary at that time, I felt like. Maybe Andre Lott.
Hey, man, I'm not going to mention names, but the bottom line is the coaching, and Fred's not going to be able to join us. I hate that. But the coaching back then was so bad in the secondary.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not going to throw him under the bus. I mean, he's evolved through and through, but I was told by somebody that very, very close to the situation, Jabari Greer showed up at the Buffalo Bills when he was drafted, and they told him, Jabari, do not worry about playing this year. You have to be completely coached. Forget everything you've learned in college. And he ended up having a pretty strong, 7-8 year career.
Oh, yeah, he was a very good defensive back for the Saints. Won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and he ended up with the Saints. He started with the Bills, ended up with the Saints, but they basically told him, forget everything you've learned in college.
Well, it wasn't like given the zone blitzes that Chavis dialed up all the time, which were such a big thing. I mean, it didn't seem like if there was one position that they put a lot of pressure on the cornerbacks, but they needed their cornerbacks to be athletic more than anything else. It seemed like with the schemes they ran in college. Am I right about that?
That that Chavis struggled against athletic quarterbacks?
No. It seemed that for Chavis' system, it was more important for cornerbacks to just be athletic than to actually understand the nuances of actually playing cornerback man to man.
Yes, and they they played a lot of man. A lot of man. So remember the old gripe used to be you're not looking at the ball.
Yeah.
It would drop in over their head. Well, it's because you're playing man all the time. You can't look back at the ball. If you look back at the ball when you're playing man, you're going to lose your receiver. So I just thought and I think it's proven out. I mean, John Chavis is now a middle school coach. So, I mean, he went to A&M, he went to Arkansas. If he has talent, like a lot of coaches, he can be successful. But is he a great X's and O's guy? Probably not.